So today we're going to hear from our groups, beginning with Professor Rosen's group on preserving fishing on wild and scenic rivers. So if the briefer is ready, let's begin.
The Collawash River, Oregon. Wilson Creek River, North Carolina. American River, California. And the Sable River, Michigan. Each river you see here is a unique representation of its region, a slice of a disappearing Americana. From the Pacific Northwest to the East Coast, each river you see here is indicative of a pristine and ecologically sound environment. Despite the wide-ranging geographic locations, all of these rivers have something in common. They are all wild and scenic. So what are wild and scenic rivers? I'm glad you asked. They are pristine river ecosystems, untouched by man-made changes. The designation was created by the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act of 1968, which preserves wild and scenic rivers for the benefit of future and present generations. But wild and scenic rivers are under threat from aquaculture facilities. Aquaculture is the rearing of aquatic animals or the cultivation of aquatic plants for food. This is the state of aquaculture facilities on our wild and scenic rivers today. As you can see, the approximately 15 red dots represent the aquaculture facilities, while the wild and scenic rivers are represented by the blue lines. With this in mind, I will present the first-year implementation plan for HR 962, the Preserve Fishing on Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. This is our agenda for today. I'll go into the specifics of how aquaculture impacts rivers, the first-year implementation plan for HR 962, key agencies involved with this bill, and a closer look at how the bill will affect aquaculture businesses. So this bill is at the crux of sustainability of food production versus preservation. There is a growing need for aquaculture. How are we going to feed the future 9 billion people on this earth? Aquaculture can be part of that answer. However, the aquaculture industry should not come at the expense of our wild and scenic rivers. As stated before, aquaculture can be a threat to these rivers. The blue box here represents aquaculture facilities, while the green box represents the wild and scenic river segment, which also includes wild and scenic river life, such as fish and plants. Aquaculture is an intensive form of food production. This often involves a large amount of fish being farmed in a small space. As you can see here, the facility discharges fish waste and excess fish food into the river. The nutrients from this organic waste leads to overactive plant growth in the wild and scenic river and depletes oxygen in the water. If this process is unchecked, it will eventually suffocate and kill all of the aquatic life in this river. This process is known as eutrophication and ultimately hypoxia. Currently, the regulations governing aquaculture facilities do not take into account wild and scenic rivers that may be downstream, and the regulations for wild and scenic rivers do not account for aquaculture projects upstream. This is an administrative disconnect that leaves our rivers in danger, since there is no coordinated response to pollution events on these rivers. This disconnect is further amplified considering the bureaucratic clutter. There are 4 different agencies that oversee wild and scenic rivers, and most states have their own environmental protection agency in addition to the 10 regional EPA offices. HR 962 aims to protect the wild and scenic river through limiting the nutrient pollution coming from the aquaculture facility, preventing eutrophication and hypoxia, and untangling the bureaucratic web. HR 962 will do this via 3 main tasks in the first year of implementation. Task 1, updated permit restrictions. Task 2, robust local training of all officials involved with wild and scenic rivers. And Task 3, a river health database and response plan, which all agencies involved with HR 962 will be able to access. The updated permit restrictions will limit the amount of nutrients aquaculture facilities release into wild and scenic rivers. Local training will teach river administrators about the effects of aquaculture and how to effectively manage potential aquaculture pollution. Finally, the River Health Database and Response Plan will develop interagency coordination, learning, and response capabilities. HR 962 builds upon 2 previous bills, the Clean Water Act and the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act of 1968. The Clean Water Act established safe levels of effluent coming from aquaculture facilities, while the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act of 1968 created the process for approving projects on wild and scenic rivers. These are the agencies involved with the bill at a federal level: the Environmental Protection Agency, U.S. Department of Agriculture, which also oversees U.S. Forest Service, and the Department of the Interior, which oversees Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. The EPA has a history of water quality testing from the Clean Water Act, and the agencies in the green box make up the Interagency Wild and Scenic River Coordinating Council from the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act of 1968. The Interagency Wild and Scenic Rivers Coordinating Council manages the rivers at a local level. Ultimately, the Secretary of the Interior is in charge of HR 962. As the bill states, an aquaculture facility shall not operate on a wild and scenic river unless the Secretary of the Interior certifies the facility will not discharge a pollutant. The Secretary of the Interior is going to need some help implementing this bill. Under the EPA, we are adding 3.5 full-time equivalents as part of a field team that will monitor each existing aquaculture facility on wild and scenic rivers. We will then use the information to create the updated permit restrictions. These positions will only be needed for the first year of program implementation. Under local training, we will create a training platform. To create this platform, we will contract out the work necessary since the agencies do not have the in-house expertise for this task. For the River Health Database and Response Plan, we will add one permanent FTE as the Aquaculture Activities Director. This person will be in charge of overseeing all activities on wild and scenic rivers and report directly to the Secretary of the Interior. Because HR 962 does not become enforceable until 3 years after its enactment, there is time to create a comprehensive and strategic plan to ensure its success on day one. Each program element has major milestones to accomplish each year, with all the agencies working in tandem. In 2019, we will continue working towards each goal via establishing new permit levels from the data we collected in 2018, training local river administrators with the training platform, and completing the River Health Database and Response Plan. In 2020, we will develop fees and penalties for non-compliant aquaculture facilities, continue training the local river administrators, and conduct a pilot program for the River Health Database and Response Plan. Yet without money, HR 962 is dead in the water. Each agency involved has to allocate a portion of its funds to move the program along. The Secretary of the Interior is in charge of coordinating this collaboration. In total, HR 962 will cost about $1.5 million for the first year. From a task standpoint, the River Health Database will be the most expensive, but it will provide the critical tools needed for an adequate response plan for each river agency. The Bureau of Land Management will bear the cost of the database as it manages the most wild and scenic rivers under the Department of the Interior. With this program in place, we will revisit the 15 facilities impacted by HR 962. Most importantly, the permit which allows them to operate will change based on the new monitoring program. We will now see how this permitting process for aquaculture facilities will change under HR 962. So let's pretend I'm the owner of Grayling Trout Hatchery on the Sable River in Michigan. We will walk through the permitting process and monitoring process before and after HR 962 to see how it affects me. In 2014, I decided to triple my aquaculture production. My increase in production led to concerns from local river advocates, including anglers associations, bait and tackle shops, and local politicians. They worried that this increase in effluent would lead to hypoxia in the river, killing the wild trout population, which attracts fly fishermen from all over the U.S. and therefore brings business to this area. My current permit for trout production does have effluent limits, but it doesn't have any special consideration for the wild and scenic designation of the Sable River. Plus, the standard permit means that I can self-report my own pollution without any oversight from enforcement. Now let's take a look at what changes after HR 962. The permit will have stricter pollution limits because of the special consideration for pollution on wild and scenic rivers. I will receive annual unannounced on-site visits from the water quality enforcer at the EPA, Plus, HR 962 gives regulatory power to the Interagency Wild and Scenic Rivers Coordinating Council, who know the Au-Sable River well and can see signs of pollution quickly. These changes provide for pollution reduction as well as swifter action in the case of noncompliance. Just as before, I'm operating under a permit, but stricter now. Am I going to have to cancel plans to increase production? It's a possibility. I might not have enough money for both increasing production and the technology to filter out the fish waste before releasing it into the river. However, I'm not being forced out of business. I can continue operating as long as I adhere to the new, stricter effluent limits. With this program design, we can stay true to the spirit of the bill, to prohibit operation of aquaculture facilities that contribute to pollution of wild and scenic rivers. Ultimately, HR 962 aims to strike a balance between sustainability and preservation by allowing the aquaculture industry to continue doing business, but with a few more stricter limits, and to maintain the ecological health of our national wild and scenic rivers. I'd like to thank our advisor, Professor Louise Rosen, our managers, Phil and Ella, and our team, the Graduate School of Fish, and all y'all for listening. Any questions?